Charlotte Abbott did not expect the truth to hit her before she even stepped inside the old ranch. It happened the moment she saw the deep, fresh hoof prints near the barn, prints too large and too recent to belong to any normal horse. She froze, her breath catching in her throat, because whatever had left those marks was still here. And she was alone. 3 days earlier, Charlotte had been riding through the wide-open land of Cottonwood Creek with her mare Silver, searching for nothing more than work and a dry place to sleep. She had been drifting from town to town for so long that moving felt more natural than staying, but when she saw the notice in the courthouse offering a ranch for $1, something inside her pushed her forward. She grabbed the deed without thinking twice, desperate for a chance to build a life that finally belonged to her. By the time she reached the 300 acres that were now legally hers, the sun was low and the sky was painted orange. The house sagged like an old man trying to stay upright. The fences were twisted and rusted. The barn listed to one side, as if it had given up long ago. Everything on the property looked forgotten. But it was hers, and that meant something. Charlotte tied Silver near the well and worked the pump until cold water splashed into the bucket. She watched her tired mare drink, grateful she at least had that small comfort to offer. After days on the trail, her own body felt like it might fold in half, but she pushed past the ache and made her way toward the house. The door hung crooked. The air inside smelled like dust and time. Furniture sat where past owners had abandoned it, covered in grime and silence. Still, it was shelter. She dropped her pack, rolled out her bedroll, and gave the place a closer look. A stove she might be able to fix. A table she could clean. A room she could call hers if she worked hard enough. After checking the roof for holes, she stepped back outside to inspect the barn before dark. That was when she noticed the hoofprints. They were fresh. Too fresh. Her hand drifted to the pistol on her hip as she approached the barn. The setting sun sent long shadows across the dirt, and a chill crawled up her spine. She pushed the barn door open and let her eyes adjust to the dim light. Old straw, empty stalls, broken boards, and a sudden, deep, rumbling snort. Charlotte's heart jumped. Something moved in the farthest stall. Something big enough that the floor seemed to tremble with each shift of its weight. She stepped closer, her fingers steady on the pistol grip, until a shape formed out of the darkness. A horse. But not like any she had ever seen. He was huge. His coat looked coppery, almost rusty in the fading light. His mane was tangled and wild. His ribs showed through his sides, yet he stood tall, powerful, even in his neglected state. What struck her most were his eyes. Dark, sharp, alert. Not frightened, not aggressive. Studying her, as if measuring her worth, Charlotte lowered the pistol slowly. "Well," she said softly, "I wasn't expecting company." The horse didn't move closer or back away. He just stared, ears pricked, muscles tight. Charlotte could tell he had been alone for a long time, surviving on whatever he found, and he was ready to defend himself if he needed to. "I'm not here to hurt you," she whispered. "Just trying to survive, same as you." She backed out of the stall to give him space. The horse watched her until she disappeared through the barn doors. Night fell fast. Charlotte lit a small lantern inside the house, but sleep refused to come. She lay on her bedroll, staring up at the stars that peeked through the broken roof. Every sound outside sent her heart racing. A distant coyote, the creak of old wood, and every so often, a soft movement from the barn, reminding her that a living, breathing mystery waited out there. Her thoughts churned. Who did he belong to? Why was he left behind? Was he dangerous? Was she now responsible for him? She didn't know the answers, but she felt something strange settle over her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. A sense that this place, this broken land, and that lonely horse were meant to be part of her path. Dawn broke earlier than she wanted. Roosters she didn't even know existed on the property screamed her awake. Sore and exhausted, she stumbled to the stove and brewed the strongest coffee she could manage. After choking down hardtack and dried beef, she made her way back to the barn with a bucket of fresh water. Silver nickered a greeting, but Charlotte's eyes went straight to the last stall. The big horse was standing, alert, watching her again. "Morning," she said, setting the water down where he could reach it but where she wasn't too close. "Thought you might be thirsty." The horse didn't move until she stepped away. Then he lowered his head and drank, his muscles relaxing just a little. Charlotte cleaned the barn while talking to him the whole time, telling him her name, where she came from, how she bought the ranch for $1. The horse stayed inside his stall at first, but when she walked out to dump old straw in the manure pile, she noticed he had taken a few steps closer to the edge of the stall, watching her work. Progress, slow but real. By the end of the day, Charlotte found herself sitting outside the barn with Silver grazing nearby and the rusty-colored horse standing inside his stall, calm but cautious. The sky turned pink, the land grew quiet, and for the first time in a long time, Charlotte felt she wasn't alone. She didn't know his past. She didn't know his name. She didn't know why he watched her with those intelligent, haunted eyes. But she knew one thing. Their story was only just beginning. Charlotte woke with the sunrise day after day, and each morning the first thing she did was walk to the barn. Silver would nicker and stomp her hooves, eager for breakfast, but Charlotte always checked on the rusty-colored horse first. He watched her every time, his dark eyes alert, his ears forward. He didn't trust her yet, not fully, but something in his posture told her he wanted to. Over the next week, she worked to repair the ranch piece by piece. The house needed a roof patch. The well needed cleaning. Fences needed rebuilding. With every task, she talked to the horse, telling him stories while she worked. She didn't know why she did it, except that talking kept her calm, and maybe it kept him calm too. She called him Rusty because of his coat, and though he never came close enough to be touched, he always listened. On the 8th morning, something changed. Charlotte was humming an old tune her mother used to sing. When she noticed Rusty was no longer in his stall, her heart jumped. She spun around, scanning the barn, and there he was, standing only a few feet away, closer than he had ever dared before. Charlotte froze. The barn felt like it held its breath. She slowly lowered herself to the ground, making her body smaller, less threatening. Rusty stretched his neck forward. His warm breath brushed her palm as he touched her hand with his nose. A soft, fragile moment. A beginning. "Hello," Charlotte whispered. "Nice to finally meet you." After that first touch, Rusty changed. He began following her around the property, keeping a few steps back but always near. When she mucked out stalls, he stood in the barn doorway watching her every move. When she fixed fences, he grazed nearby but kept her in sight. He still moved away if she got too close, but each day the distance grew smaller. With time, Charlotte discovered hidden wounds beneath Rusty's coat. Old scars. Rope burns around his legs. Thin whip marks down his hindquarters. A poorly healed injury in his left foreleg. Someone had hurt him badly once, and knowing that made her chest tighten with anger and sadness. "You're safe now," she promised him one evening while gently untangling his mane. "Nobody will ever hurt you again." Life on the ranch was hard. Too hard for one woman, especially with only $17 left to her name. Still, Charlotte refused to give up. She scavenged wood from collapsed sheds to rebuild a section of the barn. She stretched old fencing wire tight enough to hold cattle someday. She cooked simple meals on a stove that barely worked and slept on a bedroll until the house could be cleaned. The town of Cottonwood Creek wasn't welcoming at first. They saw her as a stranger, a woman alone, trying to run a ranch that everyone else had failed to keep. Some laughed behind her back. Others openly doubted she'd last a month. But Charlotte had grown used to doubt. She had lived her whole life proving people wrong. One afternoon, she rode Silver into town for supplies. As she loaded her bags outside the general store, she felt eyes on her. A rough-looking man with a red face leaned against the saloon wall, smirking at her. 3 others stood behind him. "That's her," the red-faced man called out. "The lady rancher." A wave of mocking laughter rose behind him. Charlotte tightened her jaw and mounted Silver without looking their way. She rode out of town, but she felt their stares burning into her back. 2 weeks later, she met them again, but this time on her land. It was late afternoon. Charlotte was repairing a broken water trough when Rusty suddenly lifted his head, his whole body stiffening. His ears flattened, and he stepped in front of her like a shield. "What is it?" she whispered. She heard it then. Hoofbeats, slow, steady, coming from the ridge. 3 riders emerged, horses kicking up dust. The red-faced man led them. Charlotte stood tall, wiping dirt from her hands. Rusty stayed beside her, muscles tight and ready. "Afternoon," the man said with fake cheer. "Tom Hackett. My buddies and me own land next to yours." Charlotte nodded. "What do you want?" "To help you," he said, smiling. "This ranch is cursed. Everyone knows it. Folks who try to live here last a season at most. So we're making you a fair offer. Sell the property to us for $20. That's 20 times what you paid." "The ranch isn't for sale," Charlotte said calmly. The smile dropped from Hackett's face. "Don't be foolish. A woman alone can't run a ranch. Winter will chew you up. Sell now and save yourself the misery." "No," Charlotte said. The younger man beside Hackett spat in the dirt. "Fine-looking horse you got there," he said, eyeing Rusty. "Would be a shame if something happened to him." Rusty let out a low, warning rumble. Charlotte's hand inched toward the pistol on her hip. The men noticed and backed up their horses a step. "Think about it, Miss Abbott," Hackett said. "Things have a way of going wrong out here for folks who don't have friends." They turned and rode away, leaving a cloud of dust and tension behind them. That night, Charlotte barely slept. She kept her rifle beside her bedroll and her boots on in case she had to run outside. Rusty stayed close to the house, watching the darkness with sharp eyes. Over the next days, small acts of sabotage began. Tools went missing. A freshly repaired fence was torn down. Boot prints showed up near the barn. Then, one morning, she found a dead coyote hanging from her gate. A warning she could not ignore. But Charlotte refused to leave. She had lost too much in her life already. She would not lose this ranch. And she knew she wasn't facing it alone. Rusty moved like a shadow beside her. Guard, partner, protector. One night, everything changed. Charlotte woke to Rusty's shrill warning call. She grabbed her rifle and ran outside. Flames lit up the eastern pasture. 3 riders circled the fire, spreading it in every direction. It was no accident. This was meant to burn her out. Charlotte fired into the air, and the riders fled, but the fire kept growing. For 2 hours she fought the blaze alone, choking on smoke, her arms shaking. Rusty battled beside her, stamping out flames and staying close enough for her to grab his mane when she stumbled. When it was finally contained, Charlotte collapsed. 5 acres were burned, but the house and barn survived. Rusty nudged her shoulder gently, his coat warm and streaked with ash. "We survived," she whispered, but she knew the truth. They could not face what was coming next alone, and trouble was already on its way. Back quote. The next morning, Charlotte rode into town with a fire inside her chest that matched the burned pasture. She walked straight into the sheriff's office and reported everything. Hackett's threats, the missing tools, the dead coyote, and now the fire that nearly destroyed her ranch. But the sheriff, a worn-out man with tired eyes, only shook his head. "You got proof?" he asked. "I saw 3 riders," Charlotte insisted. "Same number as the men who threatened me." "But you didn't see their faces," the sheriff replied. "Could have been anyone. My advice is to sell that place and move on. It's not worth your life." Charlotte left the office more alone than she had ever felt. The law wasn't going to protect her. The town didn't want her there. She was on her own. Or so she thought. As she packed new supplies at the general store, Mr. Briggs walked over and lowered his voice. "I heard about the fire," he said, "and I heard the sheriff turned you away." Charlotte nodded. "I guess nobody cares what happens to me out there." "A few of us care," Briggs said. "We just have to be careful how we show it. Hackett has friends in this town. But if he pushes too far, if he does something where people can see it, we'll be there." He slid a box of ammunition across the counter. This one's on the house." Charlotte swallowed the tightness in her throat. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind her she wasn't completely alone. She rode back home with a new kind of determination. She spent the next days preparing for the attack she knew would come. She cleared brush to create better sight lines. She placed water buckets near the barn and house. She cleaned her rifle and pistol every night. And she talked to Rusty about what was coming, asking him for help even though she didn't feel she had the right. "You don't have to stay if danger comes," she told him softly as she brushed his coat. "If you want to run, I won't hold it against you." But Rusty only looked at her with those deep, knowing eyes, and she felt the answer inside him. He wasn't going anywhere. The attack came on a moonless night. Charlotte woke to the sound of multiple hoofbeats, more than before. At least 6 riders, maybe more, closing in fast. Rusty screamed a warning, louder and sharper than anything she'd heard. Charlotte grabbed her rifle and ran to the window. Torches arced through the darkness, landing near the barn and house. Gunshots cracked the air. The ground trembled with the charge of horses. Charlotte aimed for the torches. She shot one clean out of the air. Then another. But there were too many and only one of her. Rusty exploded into action. The huge stallion charged straight at a cluster of riders with such power that their horses panicked. One rider was thrown. Another's horse bolted. Rusty swung around, hooves pounding, forcing the attackers farther from the buildings. Charlotte used the distraction to keep shooting down torches before they could ignite fresh flames. But even with Rusty fighting like a wild storm at her side, they were still outnumbered. Charlotte's heart pounded. They couldn't hold out much longer. Then she heard the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. Hoofbeats, fast and strong from the direction of town. Mr. Briggs appeared first, riding hard despite his age, a shotgun across his saddle. Behind him were 4 more townspeople, all armed. "For Miss Abbott!" Briggs shouted. They charged straight into the chaos. Hackett's men panicked. They never expected anyone to come to Charlotte's aid. Within minutes, the attackers scattered into the night, fleeing across the ridge and disappearing into the darkness for good. Silence fell heavy across the ranch. Charlotte sank to her knees, shaking with exhaustion. Rusty limped toward her, and she saw the blood on his shoulder. He'd been grazed by a bullet. Not deep, but enough to make her chest tighten with fear. "You're hurt," Charlotte whispered, running her hands gently over him. Rusty pressed his massive head against her chest, his breath warm and steady. Briggs walked toward her, wiping soot from his face. "That's quite a horse you've got there," he said. "Never seen anything like it." He fought like he knew exactly what was at stake. Charlotte nodded, tears streaking her face. "Thank you," she said to Briggs and the others. "Thank you for coming." "You earned it," Briggs replied. "You showed this town something we forgot, that standing up for what's right matters. Hackett won't be back. Not after tonight." After the men left, Charlotte tended Rusty's wound, cleaning it carefully and wrapping it tight. He stood still the whole time, watching her with trusting eyes. "We did it," she whispered, "together." In the following months, everything changed. Word spread of the battle on the Dollar Ranch and the stallion who fought beside Charlotte. People who once doubted her now tipped their hats. Ranchers who once laughed at her now offered advice or help. Hackett and his men fled the territory entirely. Charlotte rebuilt the ranch one board at a time. Fences were repaired. The house was restored. She built a small cattle herd. She planted a garden. And Rusty, strong and healthy again, became the heart of everything. He worked cattle with her, stood guard during storms, and never let a stranger step onto the property without warning her. He was a partner, a guardian, and her closest friend. Charlotte never learned where Rusty came from or why he had been abandoned. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that they found each other when they both needed someone the most. 2 years later, on a bright spring morning, Charlotte stood on her porch with a cup of coffee. The land was green and alive. The ranch was thriving. And Rusty grazed in the pasture, his coat shining like polished copper. She called him over. He trotted to her and rested his chin on her shoulder, their quiet sign of trust and love. "You were the best thing this ranch ever gave me," she said. "More than land. More than a home, you gave me a family." Rusty nudged her gently, as if telling her he felt the same. Together, they built something strong, something lasting. Something born from courage, trust, and a single dollar that changed everything. Charlotte Abbott had bought a ranch for $1. But what she truly gained was priceless.